Okay, thank you, everyone. So I don't know if you saw The Economist cover last week, but it had the world's most valuable resource, and it showed 4 oil derricks, but on the oil derricks were Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft. And the idea being that data is now the most valuable resource in the world. And everyone likes to talk about data in the abstract, but we're going to sort of dig a little deep about how it is and isn't changing the media and marketing worlds. So to do so, we've got Sasha Savic, Mediacom, big media buying firm, Eric Ashman from Group 9. Explain very quickly, because Group 9 is still fairly new.
Right.
It's Thrillist,
Yep.
Now This, Seeker, and the Dodo.
That's right. You got it right. Yeah, and it was formed about 6 months ago. With an investment from Discovery Communications, we merged the 4 brands together to create what's now a top 10 publisher in terms of social mobile distributed content. And so we're about 6 months old. That's right.
Okay, so let's start with that. We hear all the time about how data is changing every single industry. And usually when people go into the media industry, there's a lot of people talking about how data is going to change. How is it changing the media industry? Then I want you to tell me how it is not changing the media industry.
Yeah, I think that in terms of how it changes the media, everything's measurable. We've talked about this from an ad perspective for years, but we can glean incredible insights in terms of what our audience wants to see all the time. And so you've got the velocity of social publishing. We publish more than 100 pieces of content a day, video content a day across all of the different social platforms. And then we take the insights in real time around what people are engaging with, what works, what doesn't. We're looking at things like what happens 10 seconds in on a video, what happens 30 seconds in, when do people fall off, what do people like? And it's those insights that really have helped us build a media company. To give you a sense of scale, we have over 4.5 billion videos a month that are viewed. Over 50 million hours of our content is viewed every month. And the more important part of that is what we call intelligence scale. While we're a top 10 publisher in terms of reach and viewership, we're number 1 in engagement, which means that we're very focused not in just tonnage, but producing content that people actually want to watch. And data is critical to that in terms of understanding what engages people, what works brand by brand.
So you have a feedback loop that publishing didn't have before.
That's right.
Right. So a brand like Now This, for instance, it not only is creating a bunch of content, and that content is finding an audience, but that content is throwing off data that you can then use to improve the content.
Yeah, and at a velocity and speed where technology matters, an insights team matters, we're looking at that velocity of content, we're looking at that at real time, and you've got to be able to tune and react to it very quickly.
Okay, so Sasha, on the marketing side, the promise of data has always been only dog owners are going to see pet food ads. I think we were talking about that about 10 years ago. Yeah. And yet I don't own a dog and I still see pet food ads. That's weird.
It's interesting. One of the first things that I learned when I started planning and buying media, 20 plus years ago, was that 50% of money is wasted, but we don't know which 50%. And I think last 4 or 5 years we've been preaching that that's not true anymore, because we can be much more precise because of data and because of segmentation that is informed. Mm-hmm. However, it's interesting thing now when you bring changes that are happening around us in the media, and you realize that yes, we're much more precise, but largely we're still sending 1 or 2 messages to all these different tribes. And we kind of now questioning if effectiveness is actually better than before, because if you're very precise in your targeting but not very precise in your messaging, what's the result?
Right.
And last week I had a presentation with one of the big clients, and first time in my career, when you're a media planner and when you work in a media agency, first thing you tell your clients is you have to spend more.
Well, it's good for your business.
Historically, that was entrance in every meeting. I actually went and asked clients to cut media budget. To cut media budget for 10% and to transfer that money into production of content and production of of numerous messages that they're missing in the marketplace now.
Right. So what I want to get at is from the agency side, I would think that you don't have an incentive actually to change in this way. Because theoretically, the amount of data out there, and particularly tied up into these gigantic platforms, would allow less spending on advertising. Because it would be more efficient. That would lead to. But agencies don't look that different now than they did 10 years ago, really. Right?
It's interesting, agencies and marketing people and advertising people, we talk about disruption all the time. But reality is that our industry probably has been less disrupted than some other industries around us. Because if you think about this, iPhone killed Nokia in 3-4 years. Well, this data story and availability and promise was here for 5, 7, 10 years. And still kind of agencies and marketing process looks largely similar or same to what was there like 20, 30, 50 years ago. But I think we're getting to the point where we have to change. And you introduced me as a head of media buying agency. Actually, we call ourselves Content and Connections. And we're media agency that produced more than 100 hours of content last year and kind of have probably 20 different revenue streams for simple reason that what we've been doing 5 and 10 and 50 years ago is not necessarily what our clients need and what will make us survive in a
right. Well, media buying is being commoditized. I mean,
yeah.
So, but we'll get to that. So on the media side, there have been a lot of publishers that have come out and are telling a data story. And let's face it, venture capitalists love a data story, and so that has helped them attract investment to varying degrees. How much has the creation of media gone towards the science side versus the art side in reality?
I think it varies company by company. We strongly believe that brand matters, that the quality of content matters. I think that, look, we saw this in the old SEO days where content farms came up and they'd spin out reams of content. Some of them went public, and then they'd ultimately collapse because there's no brand there. And ultimately, if you're trying to build a large advertising business, you need to attract brand dollars. And brands want to be around great content and great brands. Mm-hmm. And you also need that level of engagement with your audience. And so for us, again, coming back to the idea of we've got tremendous scale, but we're tops in engagement, that's just not important for us in terms of a proof point that people like our content. It's an important story for brands because ultimately it demonstrates, we know how to tell stories for them to our audience in a way that they'll engage with, and that when they wrap themselves around the brand content that we do, our audience is leaning forward and ready to engage with it. Mm-hmm. And so
sounds like it's still more art than science.
I think you need both, and I think that this is where it gets really tricky. And Sasha mentioned earlier, the industry's at a point where I think we're at an inflection point where change is accelerating, and that you can't tell stories the old way. Over 50% of video is now consumed on mobile. Like, if that doesn't change the business and fundamentally change the way that brands reach consumers, we're at a really important inflection point. And I think that you now have, as a publisher, an opportunity to focus on telling great stories, using the data to ensure that not only that you're telling a good story, but that you're telling it the right way. And the complexity comes that's different platform by platform. What works on Facebook versus Instagram stories versus Snapchat is different. And so you need those signals to ensure that you get it right, and you need that investment in brand and storytelling and creative to ultimately build something that builds value.
So as a media company now in 2017, you're dependent on platforms. Just about every media company is.
Sure. I mean, just look, cable was the distribution pipe of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and 2000s, and even today. And I think that the big thesis of Group 9 is there are new distribution platforms that have developed, and that is Facebook, it's Snap, it's Twitter, it's Instagram. Now,
and that's well known, but how about from a data side? How dependent are you on the platforms for the data in order to create the right kind of content that will reach the audience through their distribution?
To some, we pull a lot of data from them. We also build a lot of our own. So technology, you made an interesting point. Media companies for the last 15 years have positioned themselves as technology companies because it helps you raise venture money. Technology is certainly an important part of what we built. And so we have an entire technology stack that pulls data in from the platforms and from other sources to develop the type of insights that we're talking about.
Yeah. So Sasha, we've heard a lot about how the platforms, Google and Facebook, are taking almost all of the growth in digital advertising. And a lot of that is because what that economist cover was talking about how they have vast pools of data. Are you seeing that happen?
Well, obviously, I mean, they're dominant players and their position is undeniable, but the question is, at the end of the day, consumers will decide what works and what doesn't work. When it comes to data, I mean, they have lots of data and they're leaders in data, but on the other side, Group M that we belong to, we launched 6 months ago our data platform, which actually has majority of data sources that everyone uses, plus Kantar and Millward Brown. What makes big difference is actually that we have a brand data, and we understand how to use data to build a brand in this new world. So question is not necessarily is it Google, Facebook, or whoever else versus agencies and what data stacks we have. I think question is like how the marketing and theory of marketing will change to get relevant for today. If you think about brands, I mean, brands are untouchable. There is one brand positioning, and there is this premise that brand means same thing for all people. Well, that's one big problem, because before we admit that brand can mean different things for different people in different tribes, we will not have different messages, we will not have more messages, and we will not know how to distribute them to take advantage of it. Because, right now, it's kind of like you have all this data, you have all this precision, and you're asking yourself what to do with it. Because theory of marketing processes and advertising did not change yet to take advantage of this new landscape that is in front of us.
So, I mean, we've seen a big shift, the start of a big shift, I think, in advertising with programmatic advertising, with the application of data and automation technologies. Yep. And in theory, that should make the agency less important, right? I mean, you've got these giant platforms, you got Google, you got Facebook, Amazon is lurking. What is the role for agencies when this promise of automation and the application of data truly takes off? Because it's still very early.
Well, if you think about this, again, going back to a question about what's going to be meaning of brand, because in a moment when you use data and give me offer of product or service, in a moment when I need that product or service for the price that I'm willing to pay, that will fulfill my basic need and kind of will provide value in my life. So I don't know if people will react to that to say, like, you know what, meaning of brands that I was dreaming about all my life to own something changed because I have exactly what I need.
So will brand become less important? I mean, because you have so much data, because I think the promise of Google was perfect information, and brands thrive on
I don't think that brands will become less important, but I think brands will need to change. And let me give you an example. Like 6 months ago, I bought a new car. And I bought a German SUV. And my neighbor who lives next to me is actually German-American, who when he saw me, came across the lawn and he said, Sasha, finally you realize that German technology and cars and engine is so much better than that Japanese stuff you had before. And I was listening to him and I said, like, I'm 6'6" and I bought this car because I didn't hit the roof with my head. So I just found the car that I fit in. So my point is, like, if my neighbor and I...
Not able to empathize with this, honestly, Sasha.
If my neighbor and I, if we have a same car, but we bought the same car for very different reasons, why brands believe that there is a one message that will convince us to get there? So I think again, data gives us great opportunity to reframe marketing, reframe advertising, and reframe our industry for whatever reason marketers and agencies are kind of...
But won't they just commoditize themselves then? I mean, in what you're saying, I mean, because brand has been the way out of commoditization.
Yeah, but
It's an excuse to charge
like in
more.
any other industry, like you will choose product or service that is better than competitive product and service. So it's like, there will be a ranking again, but different kind of ranking that you have now. I think tradition in the brands will kind of probably have less of importance than it is.
So
That must be scary for you, Eric.
No, I think that you're positioning this as an either or, and I think that they both have a place to play.
It's more fun as an either.
I know it is. That's why I'm breaking it down. So I think, look, I think it's hard to understate or overstate the amount of change that we're about to go through. In terms of, again, like 50% of video is watched on mobile devices, the kind of the cord cutting that's going on and the impact it's having on cable, and the evolution of people watch more TV than ever. Shows still matter. Quality of content still matters. More content, more money is spent on more content than ever before in terms of the amount of quality content that people have to choose from. And so it's about the distribution of that content and where it's consumed. That creates all new challenges for brands and agencies and even for publishers to figure out how to reach those audiences in all of these different places. From an advertising perspective, and even what we do at Group 9 within our own studio, it's understanding how to tell stories across each of those platforms and bringing that into the brand. So look, programmatic is great for tonnage and scale and hitting people over and over again, and there's a really valuable part of the ecosystem that I think that fits into. When you get into, look at the Facebook mid-roll program that they're trying out right now. So how do you insert a 15-second ad into a 90-second piece of content and not lose people as soon as the mid-roll comes up? That's really tricky. It's an important part of what Facebook is trying to figure out. Facebook has definitively said they want to be a video company. Snap describes themselves as a TV company. And so in all of these worlds where video is changing and becoming a core part of all of these platforms, I think from a creative perspective, from an agency perspective, from a publisher perspective, it is that balance of art and science. And ultimately, there are going to be points and opportunities where brands want to be around great content, great brands on great platforms, and need to figure out a way to tell their stories in 15-second and 30-second and 45-second increments in a way that doesn't break up the user experience, the watching experience. And that's going to be really interesting.
So do you think, if you look at the platforms, and let's take Google and Facebook, and then we'll add in Snapchat too, and you look at the path that Netflix took, they started as a distribution platform, and then they just decided to go and make the stuff themselves.
Sure.
Why won't the platforms do the same thing?
Well, they very well may. I think that what Snap is doing in terms of paying for content now. So Snap, when they launched, you could sell advertising against their platform, and then they turned around and they turned Discover into basically a paid platform. And you see that Facebook is testing similar things. We're positioning ourselves in the same way. So we're building stories that if people want to pay for the content itself and we can license and syndicate that out, great. And what's interesting is how much that starts to look like traditional television. And if we have an opportunity to distribute our content from an ad-supported perspective as well, we need to be great at doing that and creating branded content and tell stories for our brands that really resonates. So I would argue that publishers, particularly publishers in the video space, they need to be prepared for both worlds.
Yeah. So when it comes to the platform, Sasha, one of the things that the economists have brought up is that perhaps that there is a case not for breaking up the platforms because of these vast data stores, but to actually regulating them like utilities. Can you see that?
I think it's going to be necessary, because some of the previous discussions here related to fake news and overall influence of platforms to our lives and our politics and future of the country. So it's not necessarily is going to be brought by clients in advertising industry, but it's going to be necessary to bring some
society level. So from a marketing perspective, I'm always interested because Cambridge Analytica gets a lot of attention for their role in the election, and particularly in Europe, they get a lot of attention. And I always just go back to marketing, where usually, the people that claim to have all these sophisticated targeting and data, they're making up half of it. How much of an impact do you think from the outside that a company like Cambridge Analytica can have in altering people's perceptions? through very hyper targeting of messages?
To be honest, me personally, I'm very skeptical because, as you said, like I actually worked with some companies. First of all, like during the Obama elections, like first and second, I met like 36 different companies who claimed that it was them who brought that.
The front of the parade is a very
Correct.
crowded place.
Correct. So it's and probably they're all kind of telling truth because they participated with something. I don't think that the question was who was more precise. I think my personal view is that lots of people actually in this country got so afraid of changes.
Yeah.
I mean, I had discussion with my colleagues, and we kind of claimed that iPhone actually is responsible for Trump being president because everything that happened in our lives, all the changes we've seen, are kind of quicker than how people can change themselves. And then there was this guy who told people, hey, don't worry, like, I'm going to bring back coal mines and factories and all this. So people said, yeah, I mean, he's my guy.
Yeah.
So I think that's another thing that changes with the data and with the changes in lifestyle that we will see effects of this probably 5, 10, 50 years from now.
Okay. Sasha, Eric, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Oh.